Hey there folks, and welcome into the Truck King YouTube channel. Today we're having a fun one because we're out here in the desert with the 2025 Bronco Sport Sasquatch. Yes, the Sasquatch package has come to the Bronco Sport, making it even better off-road, and I want to put it to the test. So in this video, we're going to tackle all kinds of desert terrain. I'll tell you about all the features, and then we'll talk about whether it's actually better than it was before, so make sure you stay tuned. Let's kick it off with a walk around. So the first thing I have to tell you is that if you want the Sasquatch package, you can get it on the 2-liter Badlands or this one. This is the 1.5-liter powered Outer Banks model. And yes, that is a 1.5-liter 3-cylinder engine. It is turbocharged. It's making 181 horsepower and 190 pound-feet of torque sent through an 8-speed automatic. So if you want Sasquatch, yeah, you either have to go for this package with the 1.5 or the Badlands with the 2-liter. And the Badlands does bring along a few extra enhancements. So the ultimate off-road Bronco Sport is going to be that Badlands Sasquatch, and then this Outer Banks Sasquatch is just sort of a tick underneath. But it does get a lot of the same features, so let's go through them right now. And you're going to notice these ones right up front. You're getting this big brush bar right here. That's for added protection. Like seeing that. Plus, I do think it looks cool. It adds to the styling. There's only 4 bolts as well to take that off of there. So if you don't like it, easy to remove, easy to put back on. Now, next up, this is real steel. They've actually added steel bumpers here in the front and the back. I appreciate that. And a steel skid plate package underneath. Now, the other thing you're going to see up front here are these exposed bolts. Ford calls these Bronco bolts. They were introduced on the larger Bronco. Now they've been brought here to Bronco Sport. The idea is anywhere you see a Bronco bolt, there is an accessory that can be added to the vehicle. So they're outside, they're also inside, but anywhere you see one of these, that's because Ford planned some type of accessory which can fit on there. So that's all about sort of customization. They realize their customers are buying these things and then right away adding on to them, so they tried to make that easier. Now we get to the tires. This is probably the largest, no pun intended, change that comes to the Sasquatch. This is a set of 29-inch Goodyear Wrangler Territories, a very popular off-road tire. Sure, would I have liked to have seen 30s? Of course, but I'm sure the Ford engineers went as big as they possibly could. So yeah, you're getting larger rubber and slightly more aggressive rubber, which is nice. Now, the next feature I'm going to show you, and I think this is a stroke of brilliance, built-in tie downs over here just in front of your A-pillar. These are really good if you're hauling things on your roof. If you regularly haul a canoe or a kayak especially, these are going to be a lifesaver because now your boat hangs out here, you can tie down to the sides. Traditionally, you would tie down to your front bumper or onto those tow hooks up front. That means that from behind the wheel, those tie downs were right in your sight lines. Now they're spread out to the sides. I just think this makes so much sense. I should mention too, they are rated for a max of 150 pounds, so they're not super heavy duty, but that's fine. Again, any kayak, canoe out there, they're gonna be great. Now, as we roll down the side, you are gonna see a pretty nice roof rack. Again, talking about boats or throwing stuff up on the roof. Nice to have that roof rack to keep your roof protected and have something to tie down to. Now, on the Badlands Sasquatch model, you're also getting revised Bilstein position sensitive dampers in the back, but we don't get those here on the Outer Banks. So that's just one of those differences that makes that Badlands a little bit better for off-roading. Then we get to the back, and yeah, I already mentioned up front, steel bumpers. Well, they didn't cheap out on the rear either. This is proper steel, and look at these tow hooks. That's great. Big exposed tow hook. I just like how big the opening is, so you could fit all kinds of different shackles or chains onto this thing. Makes it convenient for recovery, or of course, if you're pulling someone else out, well, these are going to be easy spots to hook up to. And again, you're going to see some Bronco bolts here, so I'm sure there's all kinds of different stuff you could add on to your bumper. Now, I will show you another feature which I think is cool on Bronco Sport. That is the fact that the glass does open individually from the hatch. This is sort of become an adventure feature, I think. It's the idea of you're parked out somewhere, you got to get something out of your back, but you don't want to open up the whole hatch. You can just pop your glass and get in there. And now I will open up this hatch because there's another cool feature in here, and that is this neat little removable table that Ford has added. Now this is not new for 2025, this was here before, but first of all, you can fold it like this and it becomes a second deck essentially, so now you have 2 different storage spots. But if we unlock it, like so, slide it back, and pull these little feet out, it becomes a little bumper table. Once again, with the idea in mind that you're out on the trail and you want to have a picnic, you're camping, you want to set some stuff up right here, you can do that. So a really smart feature, and Ford told us that over half of their customers are going off-road and camping with the Bronco Sport. So yeah, all the features you see here are really sort of adventure and camping focused. So there's another cool one right there. Now, it's not easy too, just to slide back, and then if you do want to remove it, the whole thing's removable, so you can get it right out of your way. The other things I'll point out in the back here, you do have a 400 watt plug and a 12 volt plug too, so you're also getting power. So if you set your table up, you can also run a couple things off of that power plant. Now finally, towing and payload. So on the 1.5 liter model here, you max out at 2,200 pounds of towing. If you step up to the 2 liter, you can get up to 2,700 pounds of towing. That's not bad. And why don't we check the door jamb sticker here. So on this model as it sits, just 938 pounds of payload, which, yeah, frankly, I wish that was a little bit higher. If you're telling me it's an adventure vehicle to haul all kinds of stuff, but I can't even bring over 1,000 pounds, feels like it should have been a bit better. But you know what, we will check out that Badlands model too and see if it has a higher payload. Now let's have a look around this. This is the Badlands Sasquatch, which makes it the most off-road worthy Bronco Sport in the lineup. And we'll start with the power plant because this is the 2 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder. It's making 250 horsepower, 277 pound-feet of torque, and that is also sent through an 8-speed automatic. So yes, you are getting more power in your Badlands. Now many of the upgrades are the same, so I'm not going to go over them again. The bumper, the bash bar, the steel, the recovery points, the tires, those are all the same to Outer Banks. What's different mainly is the suspension. So this model gets what Ford calls the Haas 3.0 suspension. It gives roughly ½ an inch of lift to this vehicle that Outer Banks model didn't have, and that means that up front you're getting 8.3 inches of suspension travel, out back 8.7 inches of suspension travel. Overall ground clearance here sits at 8.8 inches. So yes, you are just getting slightly better clearance out of your Badlands, but if that really matters to you going off-road, this is the model you want to get. It also has those excellent integrated tie-down points. And then we come to the rear, and this is the one other big change, is back here they have position-sensitive Bilstein shocks. So I'm really curious to feel those out on the trail and really feel if they are different than what's over there on that Outer Banks model. Now, one other thing I didn't mention, and this comes to Outer Banks too, is the rear twin clutch drive unit. So essentially what happens is when power comes to the rear differential, there's a clutch controlling each individual wheel that allows this Bronco Sport to split the power left and right as need be, and it allows it to have a locker. Now I do this because it's not a real physical locker. Essentially what they're doing is closing both of those clutches to simulate a locker, and in probably 90% of scenarios it's going to act just like a locker. The only real issue here is if you're really getting some heat into those clutches. If you're just out there spinning and churning and digging, those clutches can heat up and then they will disengage to save themselves essentially. Now Ford did tell me, because I asked that question, you know, what has changed with the locker? They told me that some of those heat tolerances have been made better, so it should stay locked through some pretty gnarly stuff. But yes, in an unbelievably tough off-road situation, it's still not quite as good as a true locker, but it's pretty dang close, and you are getting that on all of these Sasquatch models. And if you're curious about the off-road numbers here on the Badlands Sasquatch, it gets an approach angle of 31.2 degrees, a departure angle of 27.9 degrees, and a breakover angle at 21.7 degrees. And now, folks, the fun part begins. We're out here driving in the desert today with this Bronco Sport Sasquatch, and we're going to get a chance to try both the 1.5 liter and the 2 liter, so I can comment on both engines. We're out here in the desert outside of San Diego near Ocotillo Wells, Yeah, I mean, unbelievable trails out here. First of all, beautiful scenery. We drove in out of the rain this morning, and now we're down here in the nice desert sunshine. So yeah, let's talk about Bronco Sport Sasquatch. And I'll say nothing we've done yet is that technical. We're getting to some tougher stuff. But the very first thing I'll comment on is just the suspension setup and the fact that we're running on just this sort of rutted out, rough dirt desert road. And the suspension feels like it had this in mind. When the engineers were tuning it, they definitely said this suspension needs to be able to take a beating, needs to be able to soak up some larger than sort of normal or average bumps. And that's what I'm feeling out here. The second the going gets rough, yeah, the Bronco Sport stays fairly comfortable and very easily controlled as well. The suspension, if it's too stiff sometimes, you can get some of that chattering and feel like you have to do more, work with the steering wheel, and I don't feel that at all. So definitely the very first initial impression is just that once you get off-road into a situation like this, the Bronco Sport feels at home. It doesn't already feel like, oh, clearly this wasn't what the engineers had in mind. So that is a good thing. Now, from behind the wheel, the features also scream, hey, this vehicle is meant to go off-road. Things like off-road mode. That's new for 2025, a dedicated off-road mode. It's sort of a general off-road mode, they say. What I feel right away is the fact that it's holding my shifts for longer, so it's generally getting me up into a higher RPM, making sure you're in the meat of that power band just more often. And then we're locked in four-wheel drive now, so rather than being reactive, which the system normally is, which means that when it senses slip, it'll send the power, it is proactive. So it's sending power to all four wheels the entire time, which is exactly what you want when you're off-road. And then just the information to me, when I put it in off-road mode, my front camera came on so I can watch that trail ahead of me. A front camera for off-roading is honestly one of the best upgrades that any engineer has come up with in quite a while, because there's tons of off-road scenarios where you can't see over your nose, especially if you're facing high up into the air, climbing a hill. As you crest that hill, you can't see a dang thing in front of you. You're just sort of hoping that nothing's in the way. Well, now we have these front cameras, and they're going to help to make sure that you can see exactly where you're going. And then right in front of me on my fully digital gauge cluster, I have an inclinometer, which I like. And then another feature I really like is my steering angle, a live readout of your steering angle. If you're doing slow speed, sort of rock crawling, and then suddenly you come to a stop, before you get moving again, I find it can be really helpful to glance down and just understand exactly where your wheels are at before you get moving and then have to compensate. So yes, like having that live readout right there as well. And then I mentioned off-road mode. Well, we do have what they call GOAT mode, so I can go through them all now just to let you know. So we have off-road mode, sport mode, eco mode, slippery mode, normal mode. So that's pretty nice, and that is here on the 1.5 liter Bronco Sasquatch package. Bronco Sport Sasquatch package. All right, folks, now some real off-roading begins. Now you are going to hear him spotting me through on the radio, so if you hear that radio voice, that's what's going on. Let's see how this thing does. We should get some real good wheel lift here. Oh yeah. So yeah, honestly, that's the key I felt coming through there. Man, this thing feels so right size, so small, you can fit in those tight spots. And then when you are lifting a wheel, because it's not that heavy, when it's coming down, you never get that big smash. Yeah, the dimensions really are right for doing this stuff. Alrighty, thanks, man. So yeah, right sized, and then pretty good on the throttle modulation too. I have been feeling here in the 1.5, it was hunting for gears a little bit, and it felt like it was sort of always downshifting to get into that power. But coming through there sort of at slow speeds, yeah, plenty of power. The modulation was simple enough. Brakes feel good. And again, it's just, you know, we're so used to off-roading these days in big, massive half-ton trucks and heavy-duty trucks. So when you get in something like this right away, it's just so nice to feel like I'm not massive on the trail. So yeah, right size for doing these things for sure. And now, folks, we are off-road in the Bronco Sport Badlands Sasquatch. So, as I mentioned earlier, this is the ultimate off-roader in the lineup if you want the utmost performance. And you definitely feel that from behind the wheel. The first thing you feel is more horsepower. The 3-cylinder wasn't terrible. I did find the transmission to be shifting quite a bit when we were off-road, and that's just to, you know, try to keep it in the power band, make up for the lack of overall horsepower. I don't feel that happening here in the 2-liter. It seems to be just settled into a single gear for longer. And then, yeah, I mean, what can you say? 250 is just more than the 180 out of the 3-cylinder. And it definitely feels a little bit better. We're also running in some pretty loose sand, and these are the kind of conditions where you really feel the horsepower because, yeah, you're spinning tires and you need some power to kind of churn through it. So nice to have a little bit more power and nice to have a little bit more suspension. We're also running at higher speeds right now, doing about 35 miles per hour, and this road is pretty rutted out and a little bit washboardy. And the suspension's really doing a nice job of taking care of us. Now, I've come over some of the bigger whoops here and definitely bottomed out, but I can also say that when I bottomed out, it wasn't a super harsh bottom out. It still felt like it had a bit of softness to it, so I like to see that. Now, I don't want to call this a high-speed off-roader. It's not. There goes the mic. Well, it's shaking us enough that, yes, the microphone fell out, but we got to reset now, so we're good. Anyways, as I was saying, yeah, you definitely feel the suspension difference getting into the Badlands too. It's just eating stuff up at speed a little bit better. It's not a high-speed off-roader. It's, you know, not a Raptor. The Raptor still has many more inches of suspension travel, but considering, yeah, we were flying down that road at a decent speed, it's impressive. And I think that's overall what I'm so far feeling is there is a sense for these small crossovers that they're not going to be great off-road, and so far the Bronco Sport has met or very much exceeded my expectations. But I say that before we get into some of the toughest off-roading we're going to do today. So yeah, sit tight and we'll get to some real big obstacles. Now, you've seen the front camera, but let me go through the other cameras for you because there's quite a few views here. We're in the Badlands Sasquatch now. So this screen comes up automatically when you put it into off-road and into rock crawl mode. I love that the parking sensors come up. So you hit that one button and now the sensors shut up. That's important for off-roading. And then that's your front view, but here's all the different views you can get. You can also get the front view combined with the top down. And the top down, you can actually zoom in on specific parts of the vehicle. So if you're super close to a rock wall or something, that's helpful. So then just the front view, you can get a bit of a wider front view or you can see that brush bar up there. That's kind of neat. This is a cool view looking forward at your front tires. Once again, if you're climbing some rocks, if you're in a bit of a hairy off-road situation, and you want to see those front tires, that's massively helpful. And then that's just your classic rear view looking out the back. So nice to have that as well. So yeah, lots of good camera views. And the 360-degree camera in the Badlands Sasquatch is also new for 2025. So these are new views, which we were not getting access to before. All right, now we're heading into a rock climb, so I've got it in rock crawl mode. You're gonna hear him spotting me through, so I'll probably shut up for a second. But yeah, let's feel how it climbs. And I do like that I can lock it in first gear too in manual mode to make sure I'm getting that low range power without needing an actual T-case. Bit of tire slip right there. Let me shut the parking sensors off. Oh. Nice, okay. That was mostly on me. I'm carrying almost no momentum right there, but actually it slipped and then it managed to send the power exactly where it was needed. So all in all, that wasn't bad. I probably should have carried a little bit more speed into that, but yeah, nice to feel slippage and then it actually sort of deal with it in the four-wheel drive and get the power where it was needed. All right, everybody, now this is some steep rock crawling. So rock crawl mode, we're rear diff locked. So we went up some steep stuff, now we're coming down some steep stuff. You might hear some spotting instructions as well, but now we're using Ford's trail control. So I've got it set at 1 mile per hour. My feet are off the gas, off the brakes. This is all the Bronco Sport modulating it. And I'd say it's fairly smooth. I felt a few times where it runs away just a little bit, but we're also just slipping out here on the sand a little bit. And the real key here is if you're not comfortable off-road, if this is something you're new to, having a feature like this just takes a lot of the stress out of it. Because you're able to just focus on your line, focus on your steering, and just, forget about your momentum tools, forget about your gas and your brake pedal. And these features are becoming more and more common, and quite frankly, they're probably best used in a vehicle like a Bronco Sport, where you don't expect the owner of this to be a sort of a hardcore off-roader or someone who's experienced with off-roading, who might be comfortable with 2-foot driving. So these features, they were introduced in some of our top spec off-road models, but now that they're trickling down, I actually feel like they're more at home in something like this Bronco Sport. And that's trail control. The cool thing with trail control too is you can set it up to speeds of 20 miles per hour. So even on flat ground or through whoops, bumps, whatever you want, you can set that speed and it will hold you at it. I'm speeding up a bit now. There's 6 miles per hour coming down into this sand. And you just control it using the cruise control button on the steering wheel. And then of course, anytime you do feel uncomfortable and you want to add some throttle, add some brakes, you can do that too. Now the other feature Ford has brought here is the one pedal drive, and that's basically exactly as the name suggests. It allows you to only use the throttle, and then the second you lift off, it applies the brake, and if you lift all the way, it'll bring you to a stop. This is also replicating that two-footed driving, which in some tricky off-road scenarios is all about being super smooth. So it's one less skill you don't have to learn because the vehicle can do it for you. And I've used the one pedal quite a few times before, and it works really well. Now, I think I say this in every video about these features. They work great. The engineering is incredible. And if you use them to get you off-road and maybe you didn't feel comfortable before, but you do now, then that's excellent. They're doing their job. The only thing I will say is takes a bit of the fun out of it. The whole reason we come off-road is to sort of master our vehicles, master those driving dynamics, master different skills like two-foot driving, and having the technology do it for you, it just takes some of the fun out of off-roading. So I don't want to say they're bad because they're not, and the engineering, like I said, is incredible. The execution is really good, but I would say the best use is learn with them, but then eventually learn to not need them. Nice, so now we're really getting into the deep sand, and we're using the new drive mode. That is rally mode. That's new for 2025 on the Badlands Bronco. And what I'm feeling from rally mode is definitely some of that torque vectoring. So we have that the twin clutch rear drive unit, and it's able to shift its power left and right. So not only are you getting the steering out of the front tires, but you're getting more power to your outside wheel to help really rotate you through those corners. And you can feel it. In fact, when I just kind of really put my foot into it there, the back end actually stepped out a little bit, sort of rear wheel drive-esque. So that was not only fun, but it's just helping the vehicle to go exactly where you want it to. And now we're gonna have some real fun. Ford actually set up a dirt autocross course for us to test out the new rally mode. So we were in some really soft sand, and this is a little bit harder, but still it should be fun. I'm gonna give you guys the POV ride so you can see what I'm seeing. I'm in drive, rally mode. Here we go. again, the back end in this thing feels seriously playful in rally mode, which is awesome. You put her into it and you can really break it loose and rotate it quickly. And we're starting to get rutted out here in the sand, so the ruts really catch and grab you. Oh, and the power feels quite good as well. It's really immediate. It's right there. Here's our little chicane. Beautiful. Now, I mentioned this earlier in the soft sand, but same thing. The torque vectoring, oh yeah, right there I was off throttle coming into the corner, and then when I grabbed some throttle, you could just feel that rear end rotate around that corner. So feeling that twin clutch rear unit, liking this turbocharged power. And in rally mode, I mean, the traction control, it's letting you get loose, it's letting you hang it out, it's letting you have fun, but then honestly, it's still gonna reel you in a little bit if you're a little too crazy, and that's what I felt right there. Oh.
Once your visibility is good, you're good to go.
My gosh, that was so much fun. The dust out here is unbelievable, but yeah, that was such a good time. And again, you think Bronco Sport, you don't think you're coming out here in the sand and ripping it like that, but my gosh, that was cool. And now here comes the after action report. If you can see this down here, there's something hanging out underneath our Bronco Sport. Well, it's this thick material that Ford puts on the bottom of this vehicle. They also put it on the bottom of the Maverick, and it's all about aerodynamics. It essentially seals up the bottom and creates one large flat surface, which makes it more aerodynamic, and that equals better fuel economy. But I will caution you, if you're going off-road, with any even moderate difficulty, you're probably gonna rip that off of there. We ripped one off of the Maverick Tremor when we had that vehicle. Someone else on our trip here today in our group also ripped theirs off. And then when we were done off-roading, I took a peek under and ours is also ripped down. So yeah, it's a little unfortunate on an off-road vehicle that you've installed something that's probably gonna get ripped off. But quite frankly, if I owned this thing and I was out here in the desert a lot, if that happened, I would just take it off of there and not replace it and just, yeah, live with slightly worse fuel economy. Now everybody, we are here on road. We're in a Badlands Sasquatch at the moment, but we also got a chance to drive a non-Sasquatch model on road. We made the drive from San Diego out here to Anzo Borrego into the desert. So now we're driving back to San Diego. So yeah, I got a really good sense for this thing on road too. And the first thing I'll say, and of course this applies at all times, but what I feel when I get into a Bronco Sport is it's a small looking vehicle with small dimensions, but it doesn't feel that small inside. They've done a really nice job at making this cabin big and airy feeling. Part of that is just the design of it. It's very boxy, and that sort of gives you that sense once you get in here that they're using every bit of space. So yeah, you can see I got loads of headroom up here, lots of shoulder room. Two full-size adults can sit in here and not be rubbing. So it's always something I've liked about the Bronco Sport. That's not new for this year, but it's something I've always noticed in this vehicle. It's a small vehicle that feels bigger inside. Now, when it comes to the driving dynamics, yeah, I'd also say it's pretty solid. Just because we're in the Sasquatch now doesn't mean that you're getting all kinds of body roll and looseness. It still manages to stay firm enough to give you some tight handling. There are some twisty, windy roads we've been on today too. And yeah, you know, it doesn't feel like it handles super sharp, but for a vehicle like this, that's not what you're looking for. You just want the handling to be competent and to make sure it doesn't feel like you're working too hard to keep this thing on the road, and you're definitely not. So yeah, I would say the on-road drive is really good when you then consider how much it swallows things up off-road. Now, the one thing I'm noticing, we're here in the Sasquatch right now, there is tire noise. There's more tire noise here than there was in the non-Sasquatch. That might be obvious, but it's something worth pointing out. Once you get larger tires with a more aggressive tread, you do tend to get more tire noise, and I'm noticing that now. So there's one sort of negative if you step up into this model. Now, I also need to touch on some other changes for 2025 to the interior. The largest one, quite literally, is this over 12-inch touchscreen that's here in the center stack. And yeah, this is quite a bit larger than the screen we had before. The previous Bronco Sport, the screen was very much sort of integrated into the dash. Now that it's much bigger, it's sort of that iPad style screen that's stuck onto the dash. It's fine by me though. It's a nice looking screen, works well. We've been running the nav today along with Android Auto, and I quite like it. There's not a lot of physical buttons. For instance, a lot of companies will keep their HVAC controls with physical buttons and knobs. Ford hasn't done that here. You have to use the screen for a lot of the different functions of the vehicle, which I think that's a personal preference thing. I definitely like the HVAC to be physical buttons and knobs because those are things you're using all the time. And in my opinion, anything in the screen is a little more distracting than having an actual button. But like I just said, I think that's more a personal preference thing. And once you get used to the HVAC and whatever other controls you're using, yeah, you can get to them easily. And then also up here in front of me, I have a fully digital gauge cluster. Looks really nice, and I think the biggest advantage always of a fully digital cluster up here is customizability, is you're able to go in, change the way it looks, change the information it's serving up, and make sure it suits your needs. Now, a couple other changes up above my head for 2025, Ford has installed auxiliary switches because that was feedback they got from customers. Customers are installing light bars, things like that require power, so you're able to get in there, wire them up, and then use these auxiliary switches. And the fact that they come from the factory just means that they look good. They're well integrated. It's not some weird janky button that you had to cut into the dash yourself. So Ford took that feedback and they put it to use. So yeah, nice to have the auxiliary switches. Another thing they added to is a passenger side grab handle. That wasn't here before. And for 2025, yeah, now the passenger has a holy cow handle, as we called it growing up. So when things get a little bit rough off-road, they've got something they can grab onto. And one cool thing is on this holy cow handle, you can see more Bronco bolts. And the idea there is you can remove that handle if you don't want it using those Bronco bolts. So, you know, just another sort of nod to customizability and making this thing work for you. And then finally, the last little feature I want to point out, because I always think it's cool to have stuff like this, is this little dash storage up here. It's behind the screen. You can toss your phone in there, and there are just two USB-C ports. So the idea is, if you do have stuff up there, you can be charging it. You don't got to run cords up from down below. So nice to have a little bit of extra storage there too. So yeah, for 2025 in the interior, Ford really updated everything just a little bit to make it more modern, make it more convenient. It definitely feels that way. And then yeah, you've already seen all the awesome off-road upgrades that they brought here too that do make it legitimately better off-road. I'm sure by now you are wondering, what does it cost? Well, let me throw up all the prices for you right here. Now that we're off the trails and I've had sort of a chance to digest everything we just did, I do have one, I'd call it a word of caution. It's not even really a complaint. And I'll just reinforce the positives one more time. Yeah, with the Sasquatch package, the Bronco Sport is better than ever off-road. And I would say it's a legitimate off-roader. This thing was doing some really incredible things today. Now, it doesn't have excellent clearance, you know, only 8.8 inches of ground clearance. And in some situations, that is going to be the limiting factor, especially if you're talking about mud or snow or things like that. So yes, you just have to recognize that it doesn't have the best clearance. And then I think the other thing that sort of caught me was that more than once, I kind of overcooked a couple of the whoops. I maybe misjudged some of the bumps, and we did have some pretty hard hits. And some forward to back kind of bucking through the whoops too, because the wheelbase here isn't too long. But what it reminded me is that this is the kind of vehicle, when you're doing stuff like that off-road, that you are running it near the edge. You are running it near to its maximum capability. So then if you do make a mistake, if you do come into something too hot, there's an okay chance that you're going to break something, or you're just going to push beyond that limit of where you're comfortable and where the vehicle's comfortable. And the reason I bring this up is, again, it's sort of like, yes, this vehicle will do obstacles that a full-size F-150 Raptor will do, honestly, and it'll do them pretty well. However, the Raptor still has that much more capability, so if you do make those mistakes, if you do overcook those whoops, you're probably going to be fine. Whereas in a vehicle like this Bronco Sport, if you make those mistakes, you might not be okay. So this is when it comes down to usage case, right? You need to ask yourself, what kind of off-roading am I doing? How often am I doing it? Am I just on dirt roads with the occasional obstacle? Do I just want to go out there and hit gnarly obstacles all day long? If that's you, I'd probably still say, yes, step up to the full-size Bronco. I think Ford would say that as well. But if you're somebody who, you know, just wants to get out and adventure on these desert dirt roads and then occasionally hit something pretty crazy, this thing is going to serve you well. So again, that's not really a knock against the Bronco Sport. It's just trying to give you a sense for where it's positioned sort of in the off-road hierarchy of things. All right, folks, we have arrived at the end of this one. Now, I got to tell you, after a day out in the desert, I'm impressed. It went over some pretty gnarly obstacles, and yeah, sure, it's operating right at its limit, but I would actually say that the limit of this thing goes beyond just a rough roader to being a legitimate off-road vehicle. If you want to have some fun out here in the elements, this is a solid choice. So yeah, folks, that's it for this one. Now, of course, I need to hear from you. Why don't you drop into the comments below? Let me know what you think of the Bronco Sport Sasquatch and everything you saw in this video. As always, while you're down there, don't forget to hit like, hit subscribe, hit join to become a member, and then come right back here to Truck King to see what we're testing next. See ya.